Zariah stared at the ring. The diamond didn't just sparkle. It stabbed the morning light into cold, crystalline daggers across her worn wooden floor. The little red velvet box sat on her kitchen counter like a dare, gleaming with audacity. It was too big, too bright, too much. An insult and a temptation wrapped in luxury, screaming everything she wasn't supposed to want. She hadn't even brushed her teeth. Standing barefoot in an oversized black hoodie and silk shorts, her natural curls still mushed from sleep, she squinted through puffy eyes at the man who dared show up at her door like this. No call. No warning. Just Li Junjie on her doorstep, rain-kissed and sharp as a scalpel. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. His silence was louder than most people's shouting. Dressed in a perfectly tailored black overcoat, shoulders dusted with silver drizzle, his hands casually tucked into his pockets, Junjie looked like he'd stepped out of a noir film. Controlled. Cold. Dangerous. His presence filled the small space with a kind of static that raised every hair on her arms. The silence pulsed, electric, heavy, intimate in the worst way. "You're not serious," Zariah finally said, her voice scratchy from sleep. She folded her arms, though it did little to mask the rising panic. "This is some kind of sick game to you?" No, his tone was quiet, even, like a threat whispered across a chessboard. "Games are for boys like Jen. I'm proposing a contract." She laughed, bitter and sharp. "A contract marriage? You think I'm desperate enough to sign away my life because you gave me one night and a stack of cash?" "You already gave me your body," Junjie said, calm as a glacier. "Now give me your name." Zariah flinched as if slapped. She wanted to throw something. Scream. Curse him out of her apartment and her life. But instead, she stood there, silent and seething, because somewhere beneath the fury, she wanted to know what came next. "You said you wanted revenge." He stepped inside without waiting for permission. The scent of his cologne, dark citrus, wet earth, and something richer older, coiled around her like a memory she couldn't escape. "So do I. I've watched Jen destroy everything he touches. The company. The family name. He's reckless. Arrogant. Undeserving. And you want to punish him by marrying me?" She snapped, eyes flashing. "What, so you can parade me around like a trophy? Make him jealous?" "No," Junjie's eyes locked onto hers. "I want to erase him." The words were quiet, clinical, but they hit like a wrecking ball. He moved farther into the apartment, examining her space with a gaze too perceptive. Her thrifted couch. The stack of unpaid bills. Her bookshelf filled with medical journals and old romance novels. He took it all in and still didn't look out of place. Somehow, he made her apartment feel foreign. "I want him to look at you," Junjie said slowly, "and realize he lost everything." Zariah's heart pounded. She hated this. Hated how calm he was. How composed. How he made her tiny living room feel like a battlefield and himself the only one with armor. "You don't know anything about me," she said, voice trembling. "I know enough." He took off his gloves with deliberate slowness. "You're intelligent. Fierce. Too loyal. And you have every reason to make him suffer." Her jaw clenched. "I also know your mother's medical file," he added softly. "Stage 4. Inoperable without surgery. And that surgery needs to happen soon. You don't have the luxury of playing pride games, Miss Cole." Her knees nearly buckled. He had done his homework. Dug into her life like it was a hostile acquisition. And she hated him for it. Hated how accurate he was. "Here's what I'm offering." He pulled a black folder from inside his coat and placed it on the dining table with a soft thud. A marriage contract. No fixed end date. You'll remain my wife as long as you choose. Publicly, you'll be Mrs. Li Junjie. You'll live with me. Attend events. Appear united. In return, I fund your mother's full medical care. Surgery. Private hospital. Travel. Post-op rehab. Every last detail. Plus a personal allowance. Zariah stared at the folder. Her fingers twitched. You're serious, she whispered. Deadly. She walked over, sat slowly, and opened the folder. Legal jargon. NDAs. Press agreements. Asset clauses. But one line stood out, bold and clean at the bottom. Marriage contract may be terminated by Mrs. Zariah Cole at her discretion, with 30 days' notice. Zariah looked up at him. You're giving me the choice? Yes, Junjie said. Power is more satisfying when you're the one holding it. Silence fell again, this time heavier, weighted by possibilities. By the price of her pain. I could walk away tomorrow, she said, not blinking. You could, he agreed. But you won't. Not until Jen tastes his own poison. Zariah didn't answer. Her throat burned. Her mind spun. Florida, her mother's fragile hands and fading breath. Jen's betrayal. Maylene's mocking smile. That damn white leather couch. She picked up the pen. And signed. 5 days later. The wedding was a storm behind glass. Silent, private, inevitable. No guests. No family. Just her in a sleek ivory silk gown designed to whisper power with every movement. And Junjie in a bespoke black suit so precise it could cut glass. They stood beneath a cherry blossom arch in the private courtyard of one of Junjie's Beijing estates. Pink petals floated like confetti in the warm spring breeze. Zariah's dark skin glowed against the silk. Her lips were painted in the shade of crushed plums, soft, bruised, and perfect. Her eyes held no joy, no sorrow, just steel. Junjie was unreadable. Not cold. Not warm. Just inevitable. The judge read the vows. Junjie placed a ring on her finger, not the original from the velvet box. This one was different. Platinum. A black diamond in the center, flanked by 2 blood-red rubies. Not a promise. A weapon. Symbolic. Powerful. Dangerous. I do, she said. But what she meant was, I choose vengeance. That night, at the Chen family gala, everything changed. The ballroom was pure decadence, a cathedral of wealth and whispered ambition. Towering gilded mirrors framed every wall, multiplying the room's grandeur into a hall of infinite luxury. They didn't reflect people. They reflected power. Crystal chandeliers the size of carriages hung from the vaulted ceiling like constellations of diamonds, casting fractured golden light that shimmered across glassware, jewelry, and polished marble floors. Every flicker of flame from the candlelit candelabras danced like secrets begging to be spilled. Silk drapes, dyed imperial crimson and embroidered with threads of real gold, rippled at the base of towering windows that overlooked Beijing's glittering skyline. Each window was guarded by sculptures of ancient guardian lions, watching the night unfold in silent judgment. The air itself seemed thick with heat and scent, jasmine, champagne, imported cigars, and the barely restrained vanity of old money. A string quartet played in a tucked-away corner, their music delicate but sharp, like the blade behind a fan. The notes of the violin fluttered through the room like petals. Ornate, ceremonial. Laughter followed the rhythm. High, polished, practiced. The women wore gowns that cost more than Zariah's entire student debt. The men, dark suits, silk ties, the occasional flash of a jade cufflink, spoke in soft voices with razor-sharp meanings. China's elite moved through the ballroom like royalty at court. CEOs, heirs, diplomats, political dynasties. Every conversation was a negotiation. Every glance, a transaction. They didn't mingle. They maneuvered. And then, silence. It fell like a blade. The quartet faltered. A champagne flute nearly slipped from a waiter's hand. Heads turned in unison toward the grand arched doors as two gloved attendants pulled them open with slow, theatrical grace. Li Junjie had arrived. But he wasn't alone. On his arm, like a proclamation, stood the woman no one expected. Zariah Cole. A black woman. Unapologetically radiant. Her skin, rich and smooth as mahogany polished in moonlight, seemed to glow beneath the chandelier's gold. Her presence was magnetic, otherworldly. She didn't merely enter the room. She claimed it. Every step was a declaration. Her eyes, lined in shimmering gold and coal, sliced through the crowd like blades. Regal. Calculating. Unflinching. The kind of gaze that had survived betrayal, loss, and love turned to ash, and come out sharper. She wore blood-red satin like it had been melted onto her skin. The gown clung to her like flame, catching light and bending it to her will. The off-shoulder neckline dipped just enough to threaten scandal, but the poise in her back dared anyone to look at her with anything less than reverence. The slit in the dress, bold and unapologetic, exposed one long muscular leg with every measured step, an image of strength in motion. Her natural curls were twisted into a low, sleek bun wrapped in a gold cuff, less like a hairstyle, more like a crown. Around her throat sat a ruby choker, burning against her skin like a promise carved from vengeance. Junjie walked beside her, tall, quiet, lethal. He wore black. No tie. Just a perfectly tailored tuxedo with razor-sharp lapels and silver cufflinks engraved with the Li family crest. His hand rested lightly at the small of her back. Not possessively. Not tenderly. But as a warning. She is mine. Mine to protect. Mine to elevate. And yours to fear. His face gave nothing away. No smile. No scowl. Just the terrifying serenity of a man who knew the entire room could fall with a word from his lips. Together, they weren't a couple. They were a calculated event. Unmissable. Untouchable. Unforgivable. Across the ballroom, near the ice sculpture and a pyramid of gold-tinted champagne glasses, Lu Jian and Mei Lin stood frozen mid-conversation. Jian's face lost its color first. Then came the glass, slipping from his fingers, shattering against the floor like his delusions. The sound echoed across the marble like a gunshot. Heads turned. Conversations died. Mei Lin's painted smile trembled. Her grip tightened around Jian's arm. Her perfectly sculpted brows twitched upward as if even Botox couldn't hold back the horror she felt. They had expected her to vanish, to weep, to disappear into shame and obscurity. And yet, here she was. More goddess than ghost. Zariah didn't blink, didn't flinch. She met Jen's stunned gaze and held it. Her expression unreadable, beautiful. Terrible. Her chin tilted half an inch upward. Her lips curled. Not in mercy. Not in forgiveness. But in triumph. A slow, regal, venom-laced smile that said, "You never deserved me. And now you'll remember me." In nightmares. The crowd stood suspended, holding its collective breath. Cameras clicked. Flashes lit the room like lightning. Murmurs began in corners like rising winds before a storm. Socialites whispered behind diamond-studded fans. Reporters scribbled. PR managers panicked. The photographs had already been taken. The story was already rewriting itself. Zariah didn't speak. She didn't have to. Her silence roared louder than a scandal. They stayed only an hour. Just long enough to own the narrative. Just long enough to make every eye, every mouth, every headline echo with her name. Just long enough for Zariah to take back the room where Jen once made her feel invisible. In the back of the Rolls-Royce Phantom, Beijing's neon skyline blurred through tinted windows like electric paint. The interior was silent, plush, safe. But tension crackled between them like dry kindling waiting for a match. Zariah leaned her head against the glass. The makeup artist had set her glow to last all night, but her soul was already unraveling thread by thread. Junjie sat beside her, unbuttoning his cuffs with slow precision. He didn't look at her. "Why didn't you speak to him?" he asked, voice smooth, but faintly curious. She didn't turn. Her gaze followed the pulsing city lights outside, their reflections stretching like ghosts across the black leather seats. "I don't speak to people I've buried," she said simply. Her voice was soft velvet, but edged with steel. He didn't answer. But in the reflection of the window, she caught his face. His mask didn't crack. Li Junjie never cracked. But something shifted. Not affection. Not desire. Respect. Quiet. Dangerous. Unspoken. She'd played the game. And she had not only survived, she'd drawn blood. Zariah allowed herself one slow exhale. One small breath of satisfaction. The war had begun. And she had just taken the first throne. But even as the limo glided through Beijing's glowing arteries, every light pulsing like a nerve, the storm inside her refused to settle. She knew what she looked like tonight. A goddess sculpted from fire and vengeance. But behind the choker, the couture, and the camera flashes that etched her image into headlines and social feeds across Asia's elite networks, was the heartbeat of a girl who had once begged Jian not to leave. Who had cried, humiliated, on the floor of his penthouse while Mei Lin had smirked behind him in his shirt. No one had seen that version of her tonight. And no one would ever see her again. But Zariah knew. And that memory sat beside her in the car like a third passenger. A shadow that reminded her that power, like beauty, was a performance. And she had nailed it. Across the city, her name was already trending. Hashtag Li Junjie bride. Hashtag Zariah Cole. Hashtag blood and silk. Hashtag the Black Queen. Journalists were dissecting her gown. Stylists were calling it the most daring appearance of the year. Fashion blogs were obsessed. Political blogs were confused. And Jen's father, a conservative board member with deep ties to state officials, would surely be on the phone with Junjie's PR team by morning. It was working. The scandal was catching fire. Exactly what Junjie had wanted. Exactly what they needed. But Zariah felt something new rising alongside the satisfaction. Fear. Not fear of Jen. Not anymore. He was dust beneath her heels. Not even fear of Mei Lin, who had been exposed for what she truly was. Temporary. It was fear of Junjie. Because he never lost control. Not even for a second. He had walked into that room like a god descending into the mortal world, and everyone bowed. Without a word, he'd recentered the universe around himself. And her. That kind of man didn't offer freedom easily. And yet, he had. She glanced sideways at him now. Still calm. Still unbothered. He was scrolling through his phone, probably reviewing the headlines, crafting the next move. "What now?" she asked softly. He looked up, surprised by her question, but only mildly. "Now," he repeated. "We let the narrative spread. And we begin the next phase. Which is letting them wonder." She frowned. "That's it. For tonight," he said. "Tomorrow, we dine with the chairman of Gene Tech. Next week, the gallery opening in Shanghai. After that, the wedding photos will be leaked. And before long, Jen will realize this isn't a show." Zariah shook her head. "You really planned all this?" "Of course I did," he said, like it was obvious. "This isn't about jealousy. It's about domination." His words sent a chill through her. Not because they were cruel, but because they were true. She leaned back in her seat, letting the weight of it settle into her spine. This was no longer revenge. This was war. And Li Junjie. He didn't fight with weapons. He fought with optics, power, and people. Zariah was now a piece on the board, but she was also something else. A queen with autonomy. A symbol they couldn't erase. Black. Bold. Brilliant. And married, by contract, to the coldest, sharpest man in the game. She thought of Jen's face again. Pale. Ashen. Humiliated. And Mei Lin, who had once sneered. "He's a businessman, Zariah. You were just a phase." Zariah's lips curled again, slower this time. More real. "Oh, darling," she whispered under her breath. "You just became mine." But before the words could settle, the car slowed. Too suddenly. Junjie's head lifted first, his eyes narrowing as he glanced toward the tinted window. They weren't home. Not even close. They had turned off the main road, onto a narrow, dimly lit alley flanked by warehouses. The driver's voice came through the intercom. "Apologies, sir. We're being diverted. Security advised a route change." Junjie didn't speak. Didn't blink. Instead, he reached under the armrest and pressed a concealed button. Instantly, a soft hum activated, and the glass between them and the driver darkened completely. "Diverted?" Zariah asked, her pulse quickening. "Why?" "No reason a competent team wouldn't have cleared ahead of time," Junjie muttered. His hand was already in motion, opening a hidden compartment in the seat beside him. Inside, not a weapon, but a sleek tablet flickered to life, loading live security feeds. Zariah saw them before he said a word. 3 black cars. Unmarked. Tailing. One behind. One beside. One waiting up ahead. Every instinct she had screamed. "What is this?" she asked, voice tightening. Junjie's face didn't change, but his fingers danced across the tablet, sending encrypted commands. "It's a message," he said coldly. "Someone didn't like the show we put on tonight." Zariah's breath caught. Jen. Maybe. Or someone higher up. This wasn't just about making Jen jealous anymore. Tonight, we disrupted an entire chain of power and perception. And someone took offense. The Rolls-Royce made another sharp turn, then braked. Dead end. The car ahead was blocking the path. Zariah's heartbeat thundered in her ears. Junjie reached across her, calmly, and opened the side panel. Inside, 2 slim devices. Not weapons. Not exactly. "Put this in your ear," he instructed. "It's encrypted. If we get separated." "We won't," she interrupted, taking it anyway. Her hands were shaking. "We just got married. I'm not disappearing on the honeymoon." Junjie smiled faintly, But his eyes were elsewhere, calculating exits, waiting for a move. The doors of the black cars ahead began to open. Dark suits. No faces she recognized. But one of them held something up. Not a gun. A phone. A screen flashed, and on it, a photo. Of her mother. Zariah froze. Junjie's eyes went sharp. Predatory. "Get ready," he murmured. "For what?" she whispered. His voice was colder than ever before. For the part where they realized they just made a mistake. And then the lights in the alley cut out. Total darkness. Only the sound of engines. Footsteps. And war, knocking gently on the door.